Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending upon where you are. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. Um, we are going to go ahead and get started. We're about 1 minute past, so we'll go ahead and get started because we know that your timing is valuable. In collaboration, of course, with Nursing Now, Sigma Theta Tau International is sponsoring a Nursing Now Challenge, a global solutions initiative. Related to fostering a healthy work environment in healthcare post-pandemic. That's what we're looking towards. We've had a big issue, obviously, as we know, with this pandemic, with the mental health of the majority of the population of the world, but definitely within nursing itself. So we wanted to be able to do something with Nursing Now to be able to really get a good idea of what kind of things can we do moving forward. For those of you that don't know much about what Sigma is, Sigma Theta Tau International Honor Society of Nursing was started out by 6 nursing students at the Indiana Training School of Nursing in 1922. We're coming up on our 100-year anniversary right now. And out of this these 6 students that came together has formed a huge, massive undertaking and a huge organization with over 135,000 members worldwide in over 100 countries. So 6 nursing students can make that much happen at that point in time in history in 1922. We definitely have even more farther ways that we can go now. My name is Matt Howard. I'm currently the Director of Scholarship and Leadership Resources at Sigma Theta Tau International, or Sigma. And what I wanted to do is to give a little bit of an introduction about what this challenge actually is and what we're doing with Nursing Now. So our challenge that we're putting out to everybody now is looking to see how people can utilize your knowledge, your background, and your expertise as nurses, of course, to develop an innovative approach to addressing incivility, or a toxic work environment in your role as a nurse or as a midwife post-pandemic. We know that the pandemic is not over, unfortunately. We know that we don't know when that's going to be, but we know that we need to start planning now and just need to start working now to take care of ourselves and our personal selves as we move forward. So that's what we're looking for, is to develop something, an innovative approach to address incivility or the toxic work environments in your role as a nurse or as a midwife post-pandemic. What does a healthy work environment look like in this post-pandemic crisis? That's what we're asking for. We like for people to be able to identify at least one potential intervention to be able to decrease uncivil behaviors in the workplace. Issues addressed by participants could be things like development strategies for nurses and midwives, as well as other healthcare providers, because we understand, of course, we're not alone in this. To be able to prevent workplace incivility, lateral violence, or bullying in the professional community. Ways that nurses and midwives and other healthcare workers work on bullying and workplace civility. Reframing or reconstructing, let's say, a system or a process within your own organization to support an atmosphere for healthcare workers. So what we're actually looking to do is to get people to be able to submit to this Global Solutions Initiative about what they think they can do and what they want to be able to do to actually be able to make a difference in their organization. Now, if you've listened to the previous webinar that we did, we had some great solutions that individuals were able to do to actually make an impact on their workplace itself. This doesn't have to be huge. It doesn't have to be grandiose. It does need to be something that can make a difference for you and for the people that you work with, so that it may be able to be replicated in other places. And that's really what we're looking for. We're looking for that storytelling about how people can actually do this, and essentially being able to give us your elevator pitch in your submission and summarize what that challenge actually is. We give a lot of information and instruction about how this particular challenge works. And what it is essentially is you go online and you fill out the actual application itself, which Nursing Now will be able to send out to you as well. And we want you to be able to consider some of the different types of things. So how does your solution address the challenges that you've identified? How does your solution improve outcomes and benefits for individuals that are being cared for in your targeted community? Who is needed, let's say, to be able to make these solutions a reality? What kind of steps do you need to be able to do to make those kind of things? And then be able to tell us what motivated you to be able to make this solution or identify this solution and actually do something about that particular issue, because it does take a lot of thought. It does take a lot of gumption to be able to go out and say, hey, I see that this is an issue and we want to be able to take care of that. And those are the kind of things that we really want to be able to hear from you about how you can make those things better in your particular area, in your particular organization. Now, people have asked then, well, what do I get out of doing this? Well, other than obviously making your workplace a little bit better, right? That's one thing, obviously. But the next thing that we're really looking to be able to do is to be able to give you something back for doing those kind of things. So some of the things that the winners actually get would be free access to some of Sigma's online educational content, specifically related to bullying and incivility, which is great. We also want to have the ability to be able to share your story during the special session at Sigma's Creating Healthy Work Environments Conference. Sigma puts on an annual, because we have seen this as being such an issue within the nursing organizations and with nursing profession in general, we have developed and put together a Creating Healthy Work Environments Conference on an annual basis. And it is a conference that is attended by individuals from all around the world that really have a passion for making their areas, making this part, their part of the nursing or the midwifery profession better from a working environment standpoint. That next Creating Healthy Work Environments Conference will be 24 and 25 March of 2022. It'll actually be held in Washington, D.C. And we're going to give people the ability to do a special session at the Creating Healthy Work Environments Conference. We're also giving a winner complimentary registration for one person to be able to come to that particular conference, as well as $500 US prize money to be able to either implement their idea or to be able to come, of course, to Washington, D.C. To do their presentation. We also ask that or give the ability for the winner to be able to participate in several of Sigma's webinars to discuss your solution, where you've gone with it, what you've done with it, so that we're able to continue the dialogue. So this is not just a one time and done. We want to continue to the dialogue because people want to know, what are some of your solutions? What are some things that people can do to make your specific area better within nursing? And those are the kind of things that we're really looking for. This particular challenge, we plan to be submissions by 20 of December, so coming up pretty soon. But 20 of December is when we're planning to have those submissions submitted. And then we will be able to let people know, the winners know, sometime in January, so that they have enough time to be able to prepare their presentation and make sure that they have travel arrangements, hopefully to be able to come to the Creating Healthy Work Environments Conference in DC. So those are the kind of things that we're looking for as far as what this particular Global Solutions Initiative is heading for, okay? And what I'd like to be able to do right now is be able to turn it over to Dr. Cynthia Clark. Dr. Cynthia Clark is the founder of Civility Matters and a professor emerita at Boise State University in the United States. And if we can, let's go ahead and turn the information over to Dr. Clark.
Greetings and welcome, everyone. It is such a privilege to be with you today. I want to first start by thanking Dr. Madigan and Dr. Howard, Sigma, and Nursing Now for sponsoring the Global Solutions Initiative to foster healthy work environments. My goal today is to share with you some of the problems that we know about in terms of incivility and other forms of aggression that occur in academic work and learning environments. When gunshots rang out at the University of Arizona nearly 20 years ago, my professional and life and research agenda changed forever. The shooter in this tragedy was an angry nursing student who opened fire and killed 3 nursing professors before turning the gun on himself and completing a suicide. Students and others who observed this level of violence were forever changed. Prior to the shooting, the gunman had mailed a 26-page manifesto to the local newspaper expressing his outrage at the nursing faculty and blaming them for his belief that they did not do a good job of helping him succeed in his nursing program. These events and that manifesto really opened the floodgates for widespread discussion about what will we do about violence in general in higher education and specifically in nursing education. And while those events, like a campus shooting, are rare, it really was a catalyst for me to really fortify my own research agenda on ways to prevent these events from happening ever again. And though we know that hasn't happened, we are in the process of formulating evidence-based and evidence-informed strategies to do just that. So let's kind of deconstruct a few of these concepts. So the first one is, what do we even mean by academic incivility? What is that? And in its simplest form, quite simple form, is that academic incivility is when there is interference with the cooperative learning environment. That can be a reciprocal process, often what I call a dance. It can be, instigated by faculty, students, or both, or preceptors or others. But what it does is that people then contribute to a climate of disrespect for one another or the learning process. Acts of incivility and other forms of aggression can be placed on a continuum. And on the left side, or the lighter side of the continuum, we tend to have more sort of disruptive, niggling, irritating behaviors, all the way up to and including things that are acts of intimidation, hostility, gaslighting, mobbing, threats of injury, and yes, something like a campus shooting, as I described earlier, though quite rare. These behaviors, even if they're at the left side of the continuum or more those niggling behaviors, can have profound effects on our emotional, psychological, physiological, spiritual, financial. All of those can create certain distress in those areas of wellness. So if we think about some of those on the left end of the continuum, and we look at nonverbals, these are things, of course, like eye rolling or arm waving or finger pointing or door slamming or walking away from a conversation before it's even ended. And then we move into more aggressive kinds of behaviors, rumor spreading, negative gossip, name calling, making demeaning comments, posting insulting comments on digital and social media sites, put downs of a vast variety that relates to our ethnicity or our gender or religion, our race, any and all of those things. And it's important to recognize that incivility isn't only what we do, it's what we don't do. So when we don't speak up, when we stay silent, when we ought to be advocating, when we marginalize or separate ourselves or fail to support a coworker, or if we fail to share important or vital information, particularly in the patient care areas where doing so can mean the difference between life and death. So I wanted to deconstruct it just a little bit more and get a little grittier about these topics. And I want to talk first about student incivility. What are some of the bad acts that sometimes students commit. And as you know, many of you are educators or work with students in clinical settings, so you've probably seen some of these, hopefully not too many, but they are things like students really sort of demanding and being persistent about, you owe me this particular grade because you know what, I paid for it. Making rude or sarcastic comments in person or online, profanity, openly challenging people, bad mouthing others, and in some cases, and I've actually had this with a couple of my students in the past, where we even see stalking behaviors either in person or online. The most chilling accounts that I have seen in my own studies are reports of students in the with academic dishonesty or cheating, especially in the clinical areas. And let me give you a couple of examples that are out of my own papers and works of a couple of students. One described that they didn't have time in their day to take a blood pressure reading or a blood sugar reading. And so what they did is they just made it up. They just made it up and they, plucked it into the patient record. Another student did something similar, though it was with a sterile dressing change, said that they had done that, but they hadn't. And again, entered it into the record as though it had been done. In those same studies, students rationalized that bad behavior, saying that if they admitted to these misdeeds, that they were worried that they might be failed from the course. They felt like they couldn't approach faculty and have a discussion about that, or worse, that they might be expelled from the program altogether. So that's just a little smattering of students. Let's talk a moment about faculty. And so faculty can behave badly as well. And so we see sometimes a belittling of students, pressuring them to conform to the ways we want them to do it. And sometimes our demands are unreasonable. Sometimes we have gender bias. We utter microaggressions. Students also complain about unfair or subjective grading. Weeding us out is often talked about, or being threatened to fail. And this leaves students feeling traumatized and helpless and powerless. Some have said that they've lost sleep at night, that they're pacing around. They're arguing with loved ones because they're so stressed out. Others have said to me, literally, you know what, Dr. Clark, I'm on my way to clinical, and these are students, and I feel like I'm going to just pull over in my car and throw up, because I know what awaits me with my clinical faculty. So what students describe then is this process of feeling like they're in this no-win situation. And they use terms like, you know what, I'm just going to jump through the hoops. I'm going to fly under the radar. I'm going to play the game. I'm just going to go into survival mode to just get out of this program. And so that was faculty. I want to talk a little bit about cyber incivility or cyberbullying, because this is a very real threat in our learning environments. And online learning is here to stay. And it has really grown in prevalence, especially and largely due to the pandemic. So online learning has revolutionized how we teach and learn. While at the same time, though, that same cyberspace allows for a good deal of anonymity. And so that sometimes people can act out, as you know, in that cyberspace. And sometimes we aren't even aware of who that individual is that's making those posts. But sometimes we see examples of cyber bullying or cyber incivility in nursing, especially around things like disclosing clinical experiences with enough detail that we can potentially identify a patient, or posting pictures of patients on social networking sites, or posting sexually provocative photos of students or using or being intoxicated by drugs and alcohol, and so much. And it really is difficult, because targets of cyber incivility may not even be aware that this is happening, particularly if I'm a faculty member and there's some incivility or cyber mobbing going on in a student-only Facebook page, for example. I might not have any idea that that's going on. And if I do, I still may feel very powerless to be able to do that. People who experience, and there's so much work that's been done on this topic in K-12, but we're seeing it now more in higher education, where when we are targets of cyber bullying or cyber incivility, it really heightens and creates a not only heightened but prolonged level of anxiety, largely due to the public nature of the internet, and it's ubiquitous and it's constantly accessible, and we've all heard if it's posted, it never really goes away. And then I want to talk a little bit about what is faculty to faculty incivility. So just recently, my research team and I published a national study. It was done in the United States, though I talk with many people across the globe who say that the findings are quite consistent with what they're seeing in their academic workplaces. But when we talk about faculty and administrators and what they're seeing in academic nursing around incivility, that of the nearly 1,100 respondents in our study, most said, it was just over half, 51 or 2% said, we have a moderate to serious problem with academic incivility in nursing education. And what's really sad, a sad fact also, is that 85% of those respondents said that they usually don't even address it. They just don't deal with it. They avoid dealing with it. And often it's because they're fearful of personal or professional retaliation, particularly around the tenure and promotion system. But they feel like there's a lack of administrator support, that addressing, uncivil acts just makes things worse. However these uncivil experiences play out, we know that the detrimental effect of academic incivility is not confined to the learning environment, because we are a practice-based discipline. So there is quite a spillover effect, or a potential for a spillover effect of incivility into the practice environment, which can negatively impact not only worker safety and mental health and wellness, but certainly patient safety. And we know that unequivocally, in fact, nice papers have been written about, especially when students, all of us really, but when students are exposed to acts of incivility, they trigger or can trigger fear and humiliation. There's an impairment in their ability to use clinical judgment. It reduces psychological safety. It increases cognitive load. And the sequelae to that is, when those things happen, students are far less likely to ask questions or raise concerns when there are potential patient safety issues. So whether these events are instigated by faculty, classmates, preceptors, nurses in practice, administrators, any and all, this messy configuration of how all of that happens can start a cascade of adverse events that lead not only to a student's ability to learn, but also ultimately unsafe patient care. I want to say just a tiny bit about newly graduated nurses. So when our students are newly graduated, both in their student role and as newly graduated nurses, they are particularly vulnerable to incivility and its effects. Studies show that newly graduated nurses who either observe or experience incivility report negative effects on their emotional, professional, physical well-being. They identify how those uncivil acts impacted adversely patient care. And we also know there's a lower career satisfaction and a heightened intent to leave. Sadly, the intent to leave is not only associated with leaving that particular unit or that particular organization, but many nurses are leaving the profession altogether. We know that in one of my early studies way back in the day, I thought at first it was sort of a surreptitious finding because I wasn't looking for it. But ever since then, the work that I've done, the work of multiple other scholars have been able to identify the link between incivility and stress. And goodness knows, the global pandemic, we have lots of stress anyway. In fact, I used to say to my students and to my own daughter who's a nurse, if you're a nurse and you chose nursing, you signed up for stress because it is a life and death profession, obviously. But now we have the impact and the effects of the global pandemic. And with the new variants of Delta and Omicron and other variants of concern, these will all increase our stress levels. And if we're not careful and come up with interventions, which I know many of you have some great ideas, is that we know, again, it compromises patient safety. It lowers our ability to critically think and clinically judge. It heightens our levels of moral distress and lowers our ability to be a strong patient advocate. And we also know that it increases our vulnerability to physical and mental health conditions. And at a time in history where across the globe, we are experiencing a worldwide mental health crisis. So the link between incivility and poor patient outcomes is well documented in both academic and practice research studies. And these acts, wherever they are on that continuum, can result in life-threatening mistakes, preventable errors, harm, or even death to a patient. As you know, nurses around the globe are experiencing incredible levels of stress, increased suicide rates, burnout, substance abuse. All of these pose significant health and mental health concerns. So the need for fostering civility and healthy work and learning environments, in my estimation, and probably yours, has never been greater. So I want to thank you for your time today. I presented some of the problems that we know exist, and I am super uber excited to hear some of the global solution initiatives that you are going to come up with and implement for us to create healthy work and academic environments for all of us. So I want to wish you my sincere well wishes for your continued good health, wellness, and safekeeping. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Clark. We very much appreciate the information you've given us and the things you made us start to think about when it comes to actually developing solutions for this particular issue. So one of the things we like to turn it over to now are the rest of my panelists here, if they wouldn't mind coming on for a bit. We want to ask some specific questions of the panelists that we have here and want to get some information from them. So some of the questions that we'll start out with are, what are some kind of things that we can do to improve workplace and well-being services available to student as well as registered nurses and midwives? And first, I'd like to talk or ask that question essentially and get some information from Craig and Jess. And I'm actually going to let them introduce themselves. So Craig, we'll let you start, and then Jess, and then we'll let you guys begin.
Thank you very much. My name is Craig. I am an early career registered adult nurse in Glasgow in Scotland, and I work with newly arrived asylum seekers to Glasgow as a senior health nurse. I'm really grateful to be here today. I am the European Regional Hub co-chair of the Nursing Now Challengers Committee, and I'm also a very proud Sigma member. I'm a member of Omega Z, which is Scotland's first chapter. So thank you for having me.
Hi everyone, my name's Jess Sainsbury. I'm also an early career nurse. I'm a registered adult and registered mental health nurse based in the UK, and I'm currently working as a research and policy assistant at the Florence Nightingale Foundation. It's great to be here. Lovely to see everyone. Thanks for having me. So is it now a point where I should share my screen? Yeah. Right. Bear with me, everyone. I always get so nervous when I do this. I've got no idea why.
She's a pro, don't believe.
I'm hoping everyone can see that now.
Yep.
Lovely. Craig, over to you.
So today, Claire, beg your pardon, Claire is my podcast wife. Jess is who is with me today. Jess and I are going to talk about the importance of clinical supervision, exactly what clinical supervision is, and creating a healthy workplace environment in this post-pandemic era. The reason we're choosing to discuss clinical supervision, it's an area that both Jess and I are very interested in, have lived experience of, as you'll hear when we explain our roles a little bit further. So like we said, I'm Craig, an early career nurse and co-chair of the European Hub of the Challengers Committee, and our Twitter handle is there if you want to follow us. And in my role as a senior nurse, I am both a supervisee, but also a supervisor for clinical supervision.
And a bit more about me. So before I worked at the Florence Nightingale Foundation, I've worked clinically in older persons' mental health. And I've also worked in education capacity as well, where I would support students, not just nursing and midwifery students, but across the MDT. But it's an absolute pleasure to be working alongside Craig again on the Challengers Committee. And I hope that you will find this brief presentation useful. So over to you, Craig.
So firstly, we just wanted to talk about what is clinical supervision. It's the name we have for it here in the UK. It may across the globe be referred to slightly differently. So if we just go over what clinical supervision is. So essentially, it's really about critical reflection. So nurses are required to regularly reflect on their practice in order to process, grow, adapt, and develop. So clinical supervision really is a vehicle to enable this to happen regularly and effectively. Now, there are many different models, and nurses and midwives work in many settings, so not every size will fit all. And there's many different models of clinical supervision, which enables professionals to choose one that suits them and their situation best. And it can really help nurses and midwives to develop their professional identity. So when we adopt clinical supervision as part of our workplace culture, it helps individual practitioners to develop their professional identity, particularly for those of us who are at the early stages in our careers. So I just wanted to talk to you a bit about one particular model, which is the one that I use in my workplace as a supervisor and a supervisee. And this is based on Proctor's model of supervision. So this model has 3 functions of supervision and the corresponding responsibilities for the supervisor and the supervisee. So these are known as formative or educative, normative, also known as managerial, and restorative, which is also known as supportive. And I think for what we're talking about with workplace incivility, developing healthy workplace cultures, and for the Nursing Now Challengers Committee's global aim of global mental health, that restorative supervision is really important. So the focus can be on one or more of these functions, and it will vary according to the needs of the supervisee, and different functions may also overlap. So just very briefly to talk about them. So formative is about experiential learning and understanding your own abilities through reflection. So it focuses on identifying areas for professional development and skill acquisition. For example, this could be continuing professional development, any learning opportunities, or even additional postgraduate education that the supervisor can undertake with the supervisee and supporting them into that. Normative supervision, this is the one we need to be careful when we are doing supervision, that it doesn't cross that line into line management or performance management, because normative supervision is about maintaining professional and organizational standards and the need to have competence and accountability. So it focuses on helping the practitioner to meet clinical governance and risk management agendas through ongoing monitoring and evaluation. Essentially, it's the quality control aspect of professional practice. So how to make it work in supervision that I've had and that I undertake with supervisees is to really, rather than it be a line management experience, it's about them identifying any areas where they are perhaps struggling and what I can put in place to help support them, and likewise me with my supervisor. And the last one that I said I think is most pertinent to what we are talking about today and about our global aim with the Nursing Now Challenge is restorative supervision. So this focuses on health and well-being. To work, it really relies on the supervisor and the supervisee developing a truly supportive relationship, which will help the supervisee to deal with the stress, distress, and emotional impact of their clinical practice. So that's just a brief overview of the model I use. But like I said, there's many models. In the UK, the Foundation of Nursing Studies, they focus on resilience-based clinical supervision. And Jess works with the Florence Nightingale Foundation, who are developing many different types of clinical supervision she will go on to discuss. Also in the United Kingdom, the Royal College of Nursing is currently undergoing a literature review about clinical supervision, and they are going to publish their findings with a list of recommendations about how this can develop in the future. Over to you, Jess.
Thanks, Craig. Nice plug of the RCN then, because I was just about to mention. So the Royal College of Nursing is our trade union and professional body, but I have involvement with, they have a newly registered nurses network, and through that and other professional networks, it is becoming apparent that it is the belief of many that clinical supervision is only for nurses working in mental health settings. But in fact, clinical supervision is an intervention, a skill for all nurses, no matter what type of setting that they work within. Now, when considering students, clinical supervision can be used both when they are out on their clinical placements, as well as when they are back at university as well. This could be on a one-to-one basis or even in a group. There are benefits to doing it, on that one-to-one or with peers. We all know that students only have a limited number of placements, no matter where they study in the world. And by facilitating group supervision, it's another way that they're able to share their learning experiences with their peers, discuss practice, and reflect on how they would act in certain situations, even if they haven't been in it physically themselves. And that peer support is a way of reminding students that they are not alone and they've got that kind of shared sense of belonging amongst themselves too. But, looking at it from a university perspective, by facilitating clinical supervision, this gives academics another opportunity to have a better understanding of the student experience out in practice. And then thinking about it from a practice perspective, with some placements being, mere weeks in duration, facilitating clinical supervision allows those staff members to get to know their students better and understand their learning needs and their competence in order to make the most of their time within their teams. So now going over to newly registered, newly graduated, early career nurses, however you want to call them, it is no secret that the transition from student to registrant is tough. That feeling of that sudden awareness of how much you don't actually know and how much there is to learn can be overwhelming. So why don't we use clinical supervision as an intervention of support as well? First, they need to know the difference between managerial, educational, and clinical supervision itself. Craig's touched on that already, so I won't go into that in too much more detail. But by introducing clinical supervision during education as students, and then consolidating the understanding of and skills in early career nurses, we will create a new generation of nurses and midwives who not only expect clinical supervision, but they are able to facilitate it for others as well. Craig's mentioned briefly my work with the Florence Nightingale Foundation, and we've recently convened well, not so recently actually, but we've convened a clinical supervision subject expert group where we are bringing together, experts in the field, students, early career nurses as well, to really drive this forward, not necessarily championing a particular model, but more the protection of protected time for nurses and midwives to actually engage in this for all the reasons we've stated. And that work with the Florence Nightingale Foundation came about when a newly registered nurse tweeted about how she was struggling during the first wave of the pandemic. She wasn't receiving supervision. She didn't want to put any more pressure on her colleagues, and she was reaching out to the global nursing community. And this is one of those outcomes as a result of that. So it shows the power of social media from a positive light as well. Now, just briefly, I know we're very limited on time, but we would love to hear from those of you who are here today. So please do tell us, clinical supervision or whatever you call it in your countries. We'd like to hear whether it exists, what it looks like. We'd also really love to hear what the barriers are. So to be able to engage in effective clinical supervision so that we can start to work together for how to overcome this. And then finally, we know that there are some excellent practice going on, and we'd love to create some case studies, via Nursing Now, via Florence Nightingale Foundation. So if anyone is interested in being a case study, then please do get in touch. Craig, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jess. So just to end with, we wanted to know if anyone has any questions. I was just typing there to Hannah in the chat box, but I was saying if we had time for some questions now, or we can maybe defer them to the Q&A at the end if anyone has them. But we'd really like to get this discussion going on social media. So if you are on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook, many other social media platforms are available, please get involved using the hashtag clinical supervision. And you can tag in either myself, I'm Craig Davidson 85, or Jess is Jess L. Sainsbury, or if you tag in the European Challengers Committee, as Jess and I are leading this piece of work at the moment, and that is European NNCC for Nursing Now Challengers Committee. So we'd really love to hear what you're doing. As a little bit of a secret, but I won't go into it too much. The Challengers Committee, we are going to be doing a piece of work around clinical supervision, and yeah, we really want to hear what people know about it. And like Jess said, if they have any examples that we can then use to highlight and really push this as an agenda to help create a much more sustainable, manageable workplace from an emotional and behavioural point of view for people, and also something to implement into their practice that will help with the agenda of global mental health. But thank you very much for being with us both today.
Oh, thank you both very much for that information. And again, Craig, I completely agree with you. We definitely want to keep this conversation going. So I definitely promote that, that's for sure. Now I'd like to turn over to Pat, one of our other panelists, to give us an introduction on health action training. So Pat, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay, Matt, thank you, and thank you for the invitation. My name is Pat Beattie, and I'm here this evening, tonight, this morning, whatever, to speak to you about health action training. I'm very touched by some of the previous speakers and what they've been actually saying. And before I actually go into detail about health action training, I've always promoted this idea of person-centered care and a person-centered culture in any healthcare organization. And this has been promoted by Brendan McCormick and Tanya McCants, who some of you might know of. But one of the key things that we always advocate is that to be person-centered, you must be centered yourself. So before we start anything, I'm just going to do a simple exercise on centering and some breathing. So I want you to actually, if you're sitting in your seat, that's okay. You can stand up for this if you wish. I want you to move your shoulders back, because we tend to crouch quite a lot, either in driving or even at our work over the care of our patients. Pull your shoulders back and attend to the idea of your center of gravity being about just an inch below your belly button. Yeah. So if you think of that, and keep your feet firmly on the ground, and appreciate that you're on this great planet of ours called Earth, and that you're in a universe. So just take a few moments to think about that. And now I want you to actually think about your breathing. And if your shoulders are back, I'm going to ask you to do what's referred to as box breathing. This is a type of breathing that's used by United States Navy SEALs to help them relax, and it's very, very effective. And it's breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, and you do it 4 times. So we'll just do one cycle. So if you breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4. That is linked to the parasympathetic nervous system. That method that will actually relax you quite a lot, and if you the more times you do it, the more effective it is. I'm just going to move on now to actually tell you about health action training. And health action training is it's actually aimed at helping nurses and midwives improve their resilience and their person-centeredness and their leadership. We're based in Northern Ireland, which is part of the United Kingdom and is also in the island of Ireland. So when we tend to speak about our context, we're influenced very much by the health services, both private and government in Ireland and in the United Kingdom. To reiterate what has been spoken about already, staff in healthcare across all parts of the world, but particularly in the UK, and these figures do refer to the UK and Ireland, are experiencing lots of complaints. And it's about 30% of those complaints are in and around communication. And why I mention those is that adds to the stress of staff, particularly if they have a value related to trying to give the best care for their patients and their families. If there's complaints, these can be quite troublesome. We know that quite a lot of nurses, almost 30% of them, actually are portraying a sense of low accomplishment. We know as well that that nurses actually are experiencing depression, deep issues in their work. It's quite disturbing. And many of them actually are feeling emotionally exhausted, over half of them. Only last year, and I'm sure the figures are the same, if not higher, almost 36% of them are considering leaving the profession. And most of them, 42% of them at least, would say that it's due to the culture of the organization and the lack of support from management. So there's no doubt that nurses and all healthcare professionals are experiencing considerable work-related stress. And it's already been mentioned by Cynthia that suicide rates are very high, and in fact higher than the other occupational groups. So what is HAT, or health action training? Health action training uses an approach where we borrow ideas from actor training and applied drama to teach healthcare professionals and social care professionals how to enhance their understanding of paying attention to other people and what is their intentional action, what are they hoping to achieve in the interaction. And this is centered around ideas of actions, objectives, and being able to adjust the actions and objectives to the given circumstances. We want them to be able to perform dignified, compassionate, and person-centered care, and also develop a skill known as sympathetic presence. And this term is quite helpful because we know that empathy is sometimes really difficult to achieve, and sympathetic presence, where you're actually in the moment and paying close attention to the other person, can be really effective. We also want to help them manage relationships and obviously communicate more effectively. But alongside this, we help them to improve self-care and enhance their personal resilience, how they cope. And engagement with service users, we're finding to be very beneficial. This interaction with service users and helping to change the culture of the workplace is really important. So it's all about experiential learning. The method is about doing and immersing the learners in the simulation and doing workshops using Zoom. Emphasis on relaxation, mindfulness, and being centered. We also, particularly in this period where people are wearing personal protective equipment or PPE, we put a lot of emphasis on voice training because there's a lot of strain on the voice at this particular time. And that runs alongside very effective breathing exercises. We facilitate creative reflection and overall help the individual to become more aware of self. Our programs as well have what's known as a train the trainer philosophy. So we do want to actually facilitate the development of nurses and midwives to be able to use and design health action training courses that are applicable to their own context. And we would be supporting you across that process. On our courses, we've actually used some very interesting outcome measures. For example, the Connor Davison resilience scale. We found that there was a over 15% shift in resilience scores after our graduate certificate in particular. We found that there was also a shift in person-centered practice, 11.76% shift in person-centered scores. So we found that people were more or felt more person-centered after they did our program. In relation to leadership, this is quite important. We've seen a significant increase in the individuals who completed our courses being able to speak up and take on and challenge colleagues and also challenge the culture in which they work. Overall, the learning experience, high satisfaction level, particularly with the experiential methods and the doing learning. The qualitative comments here speak for themselves. I'll just give you a few minutes to read some of those. You can see that finding your voice is quite important, and really that sort of is necessary if you're going to challenge anything. The training is invaluable, particularly for those people who have just recently qualified. And overall, people are recommending that this training should be done by everyone. The quote that stays with me quite a lot is the one that that this is a life skill as well as actually something for the work environment. So it doesn't just stop at the work environment; it's applicable to the individual's life, and there's no expiry date on it. So it's valuable for the future. So in summary here, we see that the pandemic has created serious issues and highlighted probably endemic problems that were already existing in healthcare. But the nurses and midwives are very much at risk. The challenges that the health sector faces cannot really be resolved by individuals. Organizations must take this on. But in my city, which is Derry, our symbol is the acorn, and the acorn grows to an oak tree. And it sometimes needs someone to plant the acorn to grow the oak tree and start the change. There is a need for training courses that are actually involving a fresh set of skills and performance skills, being able to cope better. And health action training provides that. Health action training provides an opportunity to practice skills. That's the important thing, to be able to practice and do the thing in this. So it ultimately means that the individual gets confidence in creating a more person-centered culture. The types of courses we have, there's two on offer. One is a 2-day or 12-hour course called Coping with COVID, Resilience and Recovery. And this tackles key performance and communication skills, self-reflection, relationship management, team communication, but it's really tailored to the individual group, depending on what issue they bring to the course. Assessment is by formative assessment and feed forward. The main course that we're promoting is this graduate certificate, which is a 6-day, 35-hour program. And again, there's performance and communication skills there, accountability for communication, and risk management around communication, including emotional risk, self-reflection, self-care, relationship and teamwork as well. And in this one, assessment is by role play and a viva voce, a discussion with the group, but it's group assessment. And then there's further train the trainer courses after that. You've got to do the graduate certificate first before you move forward on the training course. So our intention is that we'll create, in partnership with Nursing Now, we'll create up to 6 international hubs to offer these courses, the 2-day and the 6-day, followed by the train the trainer courses, and with a groups of health action trainers across the world that will be supported in a community of practice. Wait, there's some references here that you might want to actually look at later. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop sharing, and I think we have time for just one action or one activity. Craig has agreed to help me. Thank you, Craig, for volunteering. You actually did a taster workshop, a health action training taster workshop, and you've experienced this exercise. This shows it's not what we say, it's how we say it, but it actually emphasizes the importance of the intention or the actions behind what we say. So what we're going to do is I will ask you, how are you? Simple greeting, and you will answer, I'm fine, but we'll actually play an action of I care for you, I'm caring for you. Okay, so how are you?
I'm fine.
How are you?
I'm fine.
Okay, now we can change the action now to make it, more critical, or where I'm chastising you. How are you?
I'm fine.
How are you?
I'm fine.
And then we can change it to reassuring you. How are you?
I'm fine.
How are you?
I'm fine.
Okay, thank you, Craig. It's just an illustration of the type of activities that we do. And I believe, Craig, that you find that particular exercise useful, maybe?
Oh yeah, thank you so much, Pat, because Pat earlier on in the year with the members of the Challengers Committee did a taster session with us all, and we all went away from the whole day really thoroughly enjoying it. So thank you so much for the excellent work you're doing, and I think it's great that it's been pushed out globally.
Okay, well, audience and everybody on the webinar, thank you very much. I think we're returning now to just questions and answers.
Yep, that is the time we're at right now, Pat. So thank you very much for yourself, the information you gave us on the HAT or the HAT training. Again, Hannah's put into the chat feature there. If you're interested in participating in any of the HAT training courses that we're able to offer, Please fill out the form that she just put in just a little bit ago to be able to register for your interest in this particular training as well. She's also put in the information about how to register for the Nursing Now Challenge for the Global Solutions Initiative that Sigma is promoting, of course. That information she has put in there as well, and it actually gives you the ability to go to our forms and be able to complete that particular challenge or this initiative itself. So please take a moment to be able to go to those as well, to really kind of give us an idea of what kind of solutions you're putting forward to be able to take care of the issues that we're dealing with. Again, if you do have any questions, please feel free to put those into the question and answer or the Q&A section on the Zoom itself. We have been monitoring the chat information as well. Some things are coming through there as well. But I'm not seeing a whole bunch of information coming out specifically about those just yet, unless anyone else is seeing some of those that are coming through. We are hoping that a lot of people are going to start be able to get involved and to do these kinds of things. While we're still waiting for some of those things to come through, Pat, I do have a question for you, if you wouldn't mind. I know that you're using this for this specific kind of training, if you will, with your nursing students. Is that correct?
Actually, most of our recent work is actually with registered nurses and midwives, but over the past 7 to 8 years, it's been with undergraduate nurses. Yeah.
So this is kind of training essentially that people could be able to utilize in their own classrooms if they are faculty, and be able to teach that kind of information, those kind of techniques as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. I think it would be valuable if they did the graduate certificate in health action training to get the meaning behind it. It's actually, it's not that we're representing or dramatically changing the goals of nursing in relation to communication. You know, we're just changing the emphasis to paying attention to the other human being, and also then clarifying this idea of what is my objective, what I'm trying to achieve, and being centered and relaxed, and also then knowing how the other person might be responding, what their objectives might be as well. So that even though it's not enhancing empathy as such, it certainly enhances what we refer to as sympathetic presence, this concept described by Brendan McCormick and Tanya McKenna. You know, you're in the presence of other human being, in the moment with them. And we think that's less stressful than maybe trying to be empathetic.
The other question that I had is a little more for either Craig or Jess, if you guys are able to come back on. Really looking more at kind of understanding the link that we're putting between the clinical supervision, that thought process and understanding of clinical supervision, to incivility and that kind of stuff. How is that connection being made in your guys' eyes, and how are we going to be able to, how can we make that better, if you will, either training or awareness from that clinical supervision side of things to be able to help it filter down to make it a better workplace environment for us?
Yeah. Do you want me to go first, Jess? Just
well,
I give a lived example. You go first.
Well, and if I lead into it, because I knew you were going to come up with a lived example, if that's all right. We know each other quite well. So what I've had through the members of the Florence Nightingale Foundation and other networks is that some people do not necessarily engage in clinical supervision due to workplace incivility, and they're worried that it will be used as a punitive measure against them by management or whoever else. And if they were to engage in clinical supervision, then they would like to do that with either someone independently from the team that they're immediately working in, or someone outside of the organisation. important to have that kind of that trust and respect in order to really engage in it. So there are obviously methods or routes where you can get clinical supervised or outside of that. But Craig, do you want to then come in with your lived experience example?
Yeah. So, for example, the reason that we think it's so important that this is put into place for any field of nursing and midwifery is my first job where I qualified was in the middle of the pandemic. I was working in an infectious diseases ward as a new registrant, and there was no clinical supervision there at all. And I did have lived experience of workplace incivility from more senior members of the nursing team. I mean, they don't say nurses eat their young for no reason. So I did have that lived experience, and had clinical supervision been available to me then, or had I known where to look for external clinical supervision, I think that would have helped things. Because one of the things that we do now in my role, where we have clinical supervision, part of the restorative supervision is to talk about the relationships you have within your team. And that is with peers that you work with more junior members of staff, with external agencies you work with different members of the NDT. And it is a real space for you to talk this through with your supervisor and to really identify what steps can be taken to improve any relationships which are perhaps not the best. And it makes you have that lived, reflective, reflexive experience and be able to really manage that. So I think it is such an important key tool for dealing with incivility, because you can, if done correctly, tackle it head on before it becomes a massive issue, and it gives you the skills and the knowledge base to be able to approach a situation that you may feel uncomfortable approaching.
I definitely agree. I would bet it'd be hard pressed to find any nurse or midwife that hasn't had some version a brush, if you will, with some version of incivility or bullying or some kind of issues in the workplace as far as that goes. And again, that's one of the reasons that we're trying for this particular initiative, this Global Solutions Initiative through Nursing Now Challenge, is to kind of figure out some of the rationale and some of the reasons that we can make things better, some things that we can do to make things a little bit better for us. I, of course, have witnessed this as well. That's why this particular topic of incivility, bullying, and stuff became the focus of my doctoral work, and still is to this day, working on that. And I think you kind of hit it right along the nail on the head, if you will, a proverbial nail on the head in terms of that, is because it does come down to communication, right? It comes down to how we have that style of communication and how we can do those kind of things. So I think what Pat is doing, of course, with the health action training is just so important to be able to give us the ability to be able to have these kinds of critical or crucial conversations, if you will. And how can we have those? How can we be able to step up to be able to do those kind of conversations like you were talking about? If we had those people that we could talk to from the supervision side of things, or just had somebody else that had that kind of training and that kind of thought process to be able to help us to be able to do those kind of things. So I think it's a great information that you're going after this particular one. And Craig, we're getting ready to wrap up, but I wanted to give you one more opportunity to let us know if we're going to continue this conversation. What was that hashtag we're supposed to be using?
The one we are using to talk about clinical supervision is hashtag clinical supervision, nice and simple. But I believe the hashtag for this initiative is in GSI, I think.
In
Global
GSI.
Solutions Initiative, yes.
Yep, GSI. All right, so I'm not seeing any additional questions coming through. Again, I do want to thank our panelists for all of your stories, for all of your information today. We really would love to be able to, like I said, connect with this and continue this conversation on social media, as well as seeing some of those applications coming through in the Global Solutions Initiative on the Nursing Now website. And again, that information has been put in the chat and we'll be able to get back to you as well. But again, thank you so much for giving us your time today, or this evening, this afternoon, this morning, and really being able to take the moment and take the time to be able to think about what we can do to make this profession better. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you again for my panelists. Thank you, Nursing Now, and we hope to hear from all of you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.